It was already pouring when Isaac Granger dropped the wrench with a clank and muttered under his breath, "You've gotta be kidding me." His 6-year-old daughter, Nora, was in the backseat of his old SUV, wrapped in a puffy pink jacket, her face lit by the glow of the dashboard tablet playing cartoons. The rain had come out of nowhere, and just as he'd pulled off the side of the road to answer a call from his boss about picking up an extra shift, he spotted a sleek black car with its hazard lights blinking and a flat front tire. He should have just kept driving. He was already late. He had to get Nora to his neighbors for babysitting in 20 minutes and then haul himself across town to the overnight security job that barely paid enough to keep their lights on. But the car just sat there, steam curling from its hood, stranded in the mess of rain and wind. And then she stepped out of it. Tall, drenched, in heels. And absolutely not dressed for a breakdown in the middle of nowhere. Isaac hesitated, wiped the rain off his face with his sleeve, then glanced at Nora through the rear window. She gave him a thumbs up with a mouthful of gummy bears. "Stay in the car, baby girl," he said, and jogged over to the stranded woman. "Hey," he called out, raising his voice above the wind. "You good?" She turned, clearly startled, and for a second he forgot what he was even offering to help with. Her hair clung to her cheeks, and her trench coat was soaked through, but she still looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. And not the kind you find at the grocery store. "My tire's flat," she said, pushing wet strands of hair behind her ear. "And I don't have a spare, or service, or any idea what I'm supposed to do." Isaac crouched beside the car, ignoring the rain soaking through his hoodie. "Let me take a look." "You don't have to." "I do. You're in heels, it's freezing out here, and that tire's not gonna change itself." She blinked, stunned. "Thank you." "Isaac," he added. "Paloma," she replied, watching him with curious eyes. He worked fast. In 20 minutes flat, he'd pulled the spare from his own car, swapped it on hers, and tightened the last bolt while the rain eased into a drizzle. "Done," he said, standing and wiping his hands on his jeans. "You're all set." Paloma stared at him. "You just gave me your spare." "I'll figure it out later." "No, I mean you didn't have to do that." He shrugged, but his jaw tightened like he was trying to keep his pride from leaking out of him. "You were stuck." She looked over at the SUV where Nora waited patiently, nose pressed to the window. "Your daughter." "Yeah." Paloma nodded slowly, her eyes softening. "Can I offer you something? A ride? Cash?" Isaac shook his head. "We're good." "Look, I don't know what your situation is, and I'm not trying to insult you, but I'm not gonna just drive off while you're stranded now." He exhaled, debating, then nodded once. "Fine, you can give us a lift just to the babysitters, then I'll take the bus." Paloma didn't answer. She just opened the back door, offered Nora a warm smile, and said, "Hi there, I'm Paloma. Wanna ride in my car with your dad?" Nora grinned. "Is it fancy?" Paloma laughed. "It might be." By the time they reached the sitter's apartment, Isaac was quiet, and Paloma was watching him like he was a puzzle she hadn't quite figured out. "Thank you again," she said as he helped Nora out of the car. "Sure, take it easy." "Wait," she reached into her bag and pulled out a card. "Call me, seriously, I owe you." He looked at it. "I'm not looking for a handout." "I'm not offering one." Her voice was steady. "I run a real estate firm. I could use someone who knows how to fix things. I've got a few properties that need eyes on them. You up for it?" Isaac stared at the card like it was a trap. "You're serious?" "Completely." He looked at her again, soaking wet, high heels, $1,000 purse, and a softness in her voice that didn't match the luxury she was wrapped in. "I'll think about it," he said, but tucked the card into his pocket anyway. Paloma smiled. "Good." And then she was gone. 3 days later, Isaac stood in front of a 3-story brownstone in the West End, holding Paloma's card in one hand and trying not to feel like he'd already stepped out of his league. She met him at the door, this time in jeans and a blazer, no heels, but still somehow intimidating. "Hey," she said, smiling, "you showed up." He nodded. "I could use the work." She walked him through the property, pointing out repairs, asking questions about his rates, and somewhere in between discussing plumbing and drywall, they slipped into laughter. It wasn't forced. It wasn't awkward. It was easy. Over the next few weeks, she kept calling him back. One property turned to 3, then 5. She paid on time, more than fair. And she always showed up, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with questions, sometimes just to talk. And Isaac found himself looking forward to those visits more than he wanted to admit. One afternoon, after he'd replaced a broken banister in a penthouse overlooking the river, Paloma leaned against the wall and asked, "Do you ever think about doing something bigger with this?" He wiped his hands. "Like what?" "Starting your own company. Full-time. No side gigs or night shifts. Just you, your tools, and your name on the side of a truck." Isaac laughed. "That sounds expensive." She tilted her head. "What if it helped?" He froze. "Why would you do that?" Paloma stepped closer, her voice soft. "Because you helped me, and because think you're worth investing in." Isaac stared at her. There was no pity in her eyes, no charity, just belief, and something else, something warmer. "I've never had anyone offer me that before." "Well, maybe it's time someone did." He didn't say yes, not yet, but he didn't say no either. And as she walked away that day, Isaac realized something terrifying and thrilling. He was starting to fall for her. Isaac adjusted the collar of his shirt as he stepped into the lobby of the building Paloma had told him about, a towering glass structure in the financial district, all marble and steel, staffed by a concierge in a tailored navy suit. He didn't belong there. Not with his work boots and calloused hands and the scent of sawdust that clung to him no matter how many times he washed his clothes. But Paloma had asked him to meet her there, and her voice hadn't left room for debate. He gave his name to the concierge, who pressed a button and nodded once. "Penthouse." Isaac exhaled quietly. "Of course." The elevator ride stretched on in silence, the numbers ticking up far too slowly. When the doors finally opened, he stepped into an open space flooded with light. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline like a painting, and everything inside gleamed: polished stone floors, low modern furniture, and artwork that probably cost more than his mortgage ever had. Paloma stood near the windows, her back to him, speaking to a man in a vest and tie. When she turned, her face lit up with something that wasn't quite surprise, but not expectation either. "You came," she said, dismissing the man with a nod before walking toward him. "You invited me," Isaac replied, glancing around. "Didn't realize I'd need a suit." "You don't," she said. "This isn't that kind of meeting." He raised an eyebrow. "Then what kind is it?" She gestured toward a table in the corner where 2 cups of coffee waited. "Let's sit." He followed, pulling out the chair with the kind of caution reserved for expensive things. "I've been thinking," she began, wrapping her hands around her cup. "You're good at what you do, not just repairs. You see the structure, the potential." He didn't respond, not yet. "I own a few properties that have been sitting for months. One's a duplex in South Boston, the other's a townhouse in Newton. Both need work, real work. I want to bring someone in who sees more than just chipped paint and broken tile." "You want me to fix them?" "I want you to flip them," she said, "with me, as an investor." Isaac leaned back slightly. "You want to go into business with me?" "I want to offer you a stake, 50-50 on the profits. Cover the costs, you handle the renovations." He stared at her. "Why me?" "Because you don't cut corners, and because trust your judgment." And what if I mess it up? Then we figure it out, she paused, but I don't think you will. He looked down at his hands. They were rough, scarred from years of labor, but steady, capable. I'd need time to line things up. I've still got shifts that can't drop overnight. I know, she said. I've already talked to someone. I can buy you out of your contract. Legally, you'll be free to focus on this full time. He blinked. You already did that. I didn't want to make the offer unless was ready to back it. Isaac stood up slowly. You don't do anything halfway, do you? Paloma smiled, but it was quieter than before. No, I don't. He nodded once, then I'm in. They spent the next hour going over the details. She showed him blueprints, permit timelines, lists of vendors. She didn't speak to him like a charity case. She spoke to him like an equal, like someone whose input mattered. By the time he left, the sun had dipped low behind the skyline, casting gold across the pavement. He didn't take the elevator this time. He took the stairs, all 22 flights, needing the movement to process what had just happened. At home, Nora was curled on the couch, building a cardboard dollhouse complete with glitter glue and crooked windows. Mrs. Pierce from next door gave him a knowing look as she gathered her things. She was an angel, the older woman said, and she's dying to show you her new architectural masterpiece. Thanks again, Isaac said, slipping her the cash he always scraped together for babysitting. When the door closed, he knelt beside Nora. Hey, kiddo, what's this? It's our new house, she said proudly. It has a slide instead of stairs. He laughed. That sounds dangerous. That's why it has pillows at the bottom. Isaac ruffled her hair, then sat back on the floor, his mind still spinning. That night, after Nora had fallen asleep, he stood by the window and stared at the city. Somewhere out there, Paloma was probably reviewing contracts in a silk robe with a glass of wine. He didn't know what her world looked like beyond the penthouses and polished offices, but he knew she'd just changed his. And he didn't know how to feel about the fact that somewhere in the middle of all this, the rain, the tire, the job offers, the penthouses, he'd started imagining what it would be like to fall asleep beside her instead of alone. The next morning, Paloma called. I need you to come see something, she said without preamble. It's urgent. Is it the duplex? No, it's personal. He didn't ask questions. He just got in his truck and drove. She was waiting outside an old brick building in the South End, her coat cinched tight and her expression unreadable. I grew up here, she said when he parked beside her. He looked at the building, then back at her. You're kidding. My mother worked in the kitchen of a nursing home down the street. We lived in the basement apartment here until I was 16. Isaac glanced at the cracked windows and peeling paint. Why are you showing me this? Because I want to buy it, renovate it into affordable housing, but I need someone I can trust to oversee it. He studied her. You could hire anyone. I don't want anyone, I want you. His throat tightened. Paloma. I'm not asking for a favor. I'm asking you to build something real with me, something that matters. He stepped closer, close enough to see the tension in her jaw, the vulnerability she rarely let slip. You're not what I expected, he said. Neither are you, she replied. He reached for her hand, and for the first time, she didn't pull away. They stood there in front of the building that held her past, and something shifted between them, a silent agreement, heavier than words, more certain than promises. This wasn't just about business anymore. And they both knew it. Isaac stood in the middle of the gutted duplex, surrounded by exposed beams and stripped flooring, his mind half on the blueprints and half on the sound of Paloma's heels approaching behind him. She was late, which wasn't like her, and when she stepped inside, she was alone, no assistant, no clipboard, no phone in hand. Just her. And something in her expression told him this wasn't about drywall or permits. I need to talk to you, she said, brushing sawdust off a chair before sitting. He leaned against the window frame, arms crossed. What's going on? She didn't speak right away. Instead, she looked around the room like it might offer her a way out of answering. I have to go to New York next week, she said finally. There's a summit, real estate investors, city developers, the usual. I avoided it last year, but this time, can't. All right, Isaac said, watching her. You want me to hold things down here while you're gone? I want you to come with me. He stared at her. She continued before he could speak. There's a networking gala at the end. Black tie, and I want you there. As my partner, my business partner. Isaac's jaw tightened. Is that all I'd be? Paloma's eyes flickered, but she didn't look away. I don't mix business with emotion, or at least I didn't. He stepped closer, slowly. So what is this? You fly me out to a ballroom filled with people who wear tailored suits and drink cocktails, can't pronounce, and I'm supposed to what? Fix their espresso machines, nod along while you talk money. No, she said, standing now, her voice low. You're supposed to stand next to me because you've earned it, because you're building something with me, because everyone there needs to see what I already do. And what exactly do you see, Paloma? She looked at him, really looked at him. A man who didn't wait for permission to matter. You didn't ask anyone to believe in you. You showed them why they should. He exhaled slowly, and if it come, then you'll be staying in the suite next to mine, or in mine. That part's negotiable. There was a long beat of silence between them, charged and unspoken. You sure you want me there? He asked, voice rough. I've never been more sure of anything. He nodded once. I'll need to find someone for Nora. I already called Mrs. Pierce. She said she'd be honored. Isaac blinked. You talked to my neighbor. She offered me banana bread and asked if we were dating. He laughed, unexpected and real. She would. Paloma's lips curved slightly. I didn't answer her. You didn't have to. That night, Isaac didn't sleep. He packed slowly, deliberately, folding his only dress shirt with care and laying it in the suitcase beside a pair of slacks he hadn't worn since his brother's wedding 5 years ago. He stood in Nora's doorway for a long time, watching her sleep, her tiny hand clutched around a plastic hammer from her toy toolbox. In the morning, she hugged him goodbye like she wasn't nervous at all, like this was just another job. But Mrs. Pierce caught his arm before he could leave. She's proud of you, she said. Don't come back afraid. The flight was quiet. Paloma worked most of it, but at one point she looked up and said, You know you don't have to prove anything to anyone, right? Isaac didn't answer. He just glanced out the window at the clouds below. When they arrived in Manhattan, there was a black car waiting, and the driver took them straight to a skyscraper with a rooftop helipad and a private elevator. The suite was sprawling, white marble floors and gold fixtures, glass walls that looked out over the city like it belonged to them. Paloma handed him a keycard. You've got your own room, unless you change your mind. He took the card, but his eyes were still on her. This place, this isn't just wealth, it's a different world. She stepped closer. You've been living in the real one your whole life. This, it's just a costume. Later that evening, Isaac stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the collar of a tux Paloma had arranged for him. He hadn't wanted to accept it, but when it arrived at the door with a handwritten note that simply said, "Wear it for me," he hadn't been able to say no. She entered the suite just as he was straightening his cufflinks, and everything stopped. Her gown was deep navy, sweeping and elegant. Her hair pinned back in a way that revealed the sharp line of her jaw and the vulnerability in her eyes. "You're staring," she said softly. "You're impossible not to." They didn't speak again until they entered the gala. The room was filled with crystal chandeliers, velvet draped tables, and people who turned at the sight of her, whispering names and titles. Paloma walked in like she owned the room. Isaac followed, his hand brushing the small of her back, grounding her. At one point, a silver-haired man with a smug smile approached. "Paloma," he said, lifting her hand to his lips, "didn't expect to see you this year." "Richard," she replied coolly, "this is my business partner, Isaac Granger." The man's eyes flicked to Isaac. "Granger, don't think we've met." Isaac extended his hand. "I don't think we have." "And what firm are you with?" "I'm not with a firm." "Ah," Richard said, "freelance." Isaac smiled. "Just someone who builds things that last." Paloma's eyes flicked to him, and something shifted in her posture, a pride she didn't try to hide. As the evening wore on, Isaac realized something. He wasn't out of place. Not because he fit in, but because he didn't need to. Paloma hadn't brought him here to blend. She'd brought him to stand beside her, exactly as he was. After the final speech, after the champagne and the subtle jabs passed off as compliments, they stood on the balcony overlooking the city, the wind tugging at her hair. "You did good," she said. "You sure?" "I'm sure." He looked at her, the lights of the city reflecting in her eyes. "You never told me why you really brought me here." She turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because I wanted them to see the man who changed everything." He stepped closer. "And what about you?" Paloma reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "He changed me too." And just like that, the distance between them fell away. Not with a kiss. Not yet. But with a promise. Of something more. Something real. And neither of them would walk away from it again. Isaac watched Paloma from across the conference table as she flipped through the final renovation report. Her hair was pinned up, a single tendril falling forward as she leaned in to read a note from the city inspector. She didn't glance at him, didn't need to, he already knew what she'd say. "It's perfect," she murmured, tapping the page. "You hit every deadline, even the parking variance passed. That should have taken months." He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. I talked to the alderman in person, showed him the layout, brought him coffee from that Dominican place next to the site. Guy warmed up fast. Paloma looked up, her eyes catching his. "You didn't tell me that." "You were in meetings all week. Figured you'd see the results." She closed the folder slowly and set her hand flat on top of it. "You keep making me look like I know exactly what I'm doing." "You do," he said. "You just don't always believe it." Her lips parted, but she didn't answer. Instead, she reached for her phone and silenced it without looking at the screen. "We're selling the duplex to a nonprofit," she said. "They're turning it into transitional housing for women leaving domestic situations. They offered slightly under market, but I already signed." Isaac didn't hesitate. "Good." "I knew you'd say that." She stood, walking toward the window. "You know, I used to think success meant owning everything. Every space I walked into, every conversation, every dollar. But lately, I've been wondering if it means knowing when to let go." He joined her at the glass, the city stretching wide beneath them. "Letting go doesn't mean losing," he said. "Sometimes it's the only way to make room for something better." She reached for his hand, her fingers slipping through his slowly. "You're still the only person who's never asked me for anything." "Because I never needed to." She turned toward him fully. "What if I wanted you to ask?" He studied her face. "What are you offering?" "Everything," she said. "Not the penthouse, not the firm, me." His voice lowered. "Paloma, you don't owe me anything." "I know, that's why I want to give it." He touched her cheek lightly, the moment stretching between them like a held breath. "Then come with me tomorrow." She blinked. "Where?" "To Nora's class. They're doing a career day. She asked if I could bring someone cool and important who makes buildings happen. A laugh escaped her, quick and soft. You want me to explain zoning permits to a bunch of second graders? No, he said. I want you to meet the part of my life that's never seen this side of me. I want her to know the woman who believed in her dad when no one else did. Paloma's smile faded into something gentler. Then I'll be there. The next morning, Isaac sat in the tiny plastic chair beside Nora in her classroom, watching her swing her legs under the table with the kind of excitement only a child could summon. Is she really coming? She whispered. She'll be here. Do you think she'll like my drawing? She'll love it. When Paloma walked in wearing jeans, a loose blouse, and a canvas tote with blueprints peeking out every head turned. Not because she looked out of place, but because she didn't. She knelt beside Nora and held out her hand. Hi, I'm Paloma. Here you're the reason your dad's been working so hard. Nora nodded, shy but glowing. I made you this. She handed over a crayon drawing of 3 stick figures, 2 tall ones holding hands, and a smaller one between them with a superhero cape. Paloma unfolded it carefully, her expression softening. I've never gotten anything like this before. Nora grinned. Now you have. After the presentations, as the parents gathered their things, Isaac watched Paloma shake hands with the teacher, laughing as Nora tugged her toward the classroom pet tank. She likes you, he said as they stepped outside into the spring sun. I like her. They walked in silence for a while, the sidewalk warming beneath their feet. I've been thinking, she said finally, about what comes next. You mean the Newton project? I mean us. He stopped. Yeah. She turned to face him fully. I've spent my whole life building things, properties, deals, a reputation, but I never built a life, not a real one. Isaac's voice was steady. You don't have to build that alone. She stepped closer. What if I gave you a proposal of my own? He raised an eyebrow. You're trying to beat me to it. I'm offering a partnership. Personal, permanent, no contracts, just a promise. Isaac reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He didn't open it, just held it between them. I was going to ask you tonight, he said, but you're always one step ahead. She laughed, breath-catching. Then ask me now. He opened the box. Inside was a ring simple, elegant, with an emerald set in gold. Paloma Vale, he said, voice low. You showed up in the rain and saved more than my truck. You saw something in me didn't know was still there. Will you marry me? Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't look away. Yes, absolutely yes. He slid the ring onto her finger slowly, reverently. People passed them on the sidewalk, oblivious, but in that moment, the city could have vanished. Later that evening, in the quiet of his apartment with Nora asleep, down the hall and takeout containers, scattered on the counter, Paloma leaned into his side on the couch. You know, she said, tracing a circle on his hand, I think I was always waiting for someone to fix something in me. And I thought was just trying to keep things from falling apart. We weren't broken, she whispered. We were just unfinished. Isaac kissed the top of her head. Now we're building something. Together. And this time, it would last. The scent of fresh paint still hung in the air as Isaac stood beneath the vaulted ceilings of the newly finished community center. Sunlight spilled through tall windows, bouncing off polished floors and casting soft halos across the space. He adjusted the cuff of his shirt and glanced at the watch on his wrist, a gift he hadn't expected, engraved discreetly on the back with the words, "For the man who built more than walls." Paloma walked in just as the last of the folding chairs were being arranged. She wore a slate blue dress that fell just below her knees and a pair of low heels that clicked softly against the tile. Her hair was swept back into a knot, and around her neck hung the delicate emerald pendant Isaac had given her the night they signed the final contract for their first joint property sale. "You ready for this?" she asked, brushing an invisible crease from his shoulder. "I've installed plumbing in basements with rats the size of raccoons. This is scarier." "You're going to be fine, you always are." He looked past her to the small crowd beginning to gather: neighbors, city officials, volunteers who had helped them reclaim the derelict building and turn it into something useful. "You didn't have to plan all this." "I wanted to." She reached for his hand. "It's not every day we open a project that's ours from blueprint to ribbon." Across the room, Nora tugged on Mrs. Pierce's sleeve, pointing excitedly at the podium where Isaac was expected to speak. Mrs. Pierce smiled and gave her a nod of approval. Isaac caught the exchange and leaned in toward Paloma. "She made a sign, says best builder in Boston. It's covered in glitter glue." "Sounds like she knows what she's talking about." The speech came and went. Isaac kept it short. Honest. He spoke about second chances, about trusting someone when you've got nothing to offer but your work ethic and your word. He didn't mention Paloma by name, but everyone knew who he was looking at when he said, "Some people see what's broken and walk away. Others roll up their sleeves and start fixing." Afterward, while the crowd lingered over catered sandwiches and sparkling cider, Paloma pulled him into the hallway. "I have something for you," she said, producing a slim envelope from her handbag. "You already gave me a watch." "This is different." He opened it slowly, pulling out a single sheet of paper. At first, he didn't understand what he was looking at. Then he saw the letterhead Granger Contracting and Development. Below it, an official incorporation certificate. His name listed as proprietor. "You filed the paperwork," he said, glancing up. "You've been running the operation for months. This just makes it official." He stared at the document, then folded it carefully and slid it back into the envelope. "You didn't have to do this." "I know, but I wanted to build something with your name on it." Her voice softened. "It's your legacy." He reached for her waist, drawing her closer. "Our legacy." Their kiss was slow, quiet, the kind that didn't demand attention, but held the weight of every moment that led to it. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. "Let's go home," she whispered. 3 weeks later, they stood in front of a modest brownstone tucked into a tree-lined street in Jamaica Plain. The for sale sign had been pulled down, and a new one stood in its place. Granger Vale Residence. Nora stood on the porch with a clipboard, checking off boxes as movers hauled in the last of their things. "The kitchen is going to be the first room we unpack," she declared, "because snacks are important." Paloma laughed, agreed, snacks first, curtains later. "I vote we build the bookshelf next," Isaac said, pointing to the stack of unassembled wood in the corner of the living room. "We've got a lot of reading to catch up on." That evening, they sat on the back steps with their shoes off, watching the sky shift to lavender. A string of lights hung low over the patio, casting a soft glow as Nora drew chalk hearts on the concrete beside them. "I never thought I'd end up here," Paloma said, sipping from a glass of wine. "Where? A backyard with cracked pavement and a 10-year-old grill." "No, with someone who makes me feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Isaac turned toward her, resting a hand on her thigh. "You are." She leaned into his shoulder, and for a long time they just sat there, the silence full and unhurried. Later, after Nora had fallen asleep surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and a tower of stuffed animals, Isaac found Paloma in the kitchen, barefoot, dancing slowly to a jazz tune playing faintly from the radio. He stepped behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, and rested his chin on her shoulder. "Marry me next weekend," he said suddenly. She twisted to face him, startled. "Next weekend." "Why wait? We've already got everything we need." Her eyes searched his and then she smiled. Okay, next weekend. They married in the garden of the community center, surrounded by people who had seen them build something from nothing. Nora carried the rings, grinning so wide her cheeks hurt. Paloma wore a tea-length silk dress with a ribbon around her waist, and Isaac wore a tie she'd picked out that matched the exact shade of green in the emerald necklace she never took off. They exchanged vows they'd written that morning at the kitchen table, scribbled between coffee and toast crumbs. Vows that promised laughter, repairs, and never going to bed angry. Vows that meant something. When the music played, they danced on the same floor Isaac had laid plank by plank, their guests surrounding them with candles and applause. It wasn't extravagant, it wasn't televised, but it was theirs. After the last guest had left and Nora had fallen asleep in a pile of tulle and frosting on the couch, Isaac carried Paloma upstairs, barefoot and giddy, both of them laughing so hard they nearly tripped on the landing. In their bedroom, with the window cracked open to let in the summer breeze and the city humming softly in the distance, Paloma curled into him. "Do you think this lasts?" she whispered. He brushed her hair back and kissed her temple. "It already has." And it did, through renovations and rainy days, business meetings and burnt dinners. Through the laughter of a child who finally felt like she had a whole family. Through every cracked wall and rebuilt dream. Because they didn't just fall in love. They built it brick by brick. And this time, nothing could shake its foundation.